You touched a little bit before about your father and being renowned for being a hard man, a tough man. Gee, he had some good horsemen come under his wing, and he taught them a thing or two. I reckon some of that toughness certainly helped them.
He did, and he was hard. He expected a lot of them, I think, and they were there to do what he wanted them to do. But underneath that toughness, there was a very generous side to him as well. Like, he was very good to them when they worked for him, but he did expect his pound of flesh. And we often think about it. In fact, Peter Toomey was here the other day, and he was just saying about how, you'd just be getting ready to get down to the hotel, 6 o'clock closing, and get on the bike and down for a drink. And Dad just say, "Oh, would you mind running around the track with those harrows, and just hold them up enough," he said. But we had a back entrance to the pub as well. But he was, yes, he was tough on them, and he was just saying the other day as well that, he would ring them up, he'd go to town, always on a Thursday afternoon, he and Mum would go to town, and he'd ring them up and say, "Call in, and if you're going past," and there'd always be a big bag of fruit and, some meat or something that he'd bought for them while he was in town. So, yes, but he did expect a lot, and
Some of those guys, Jim Dalgetty,
Jack Smolinski.
Jack Smolinski. We're talking about some of the biggest names.
That's right, yes.
In harness racing.
In fact, Jack was there twice. He was there for a couple of years, and then he left and came back again. So,
well, as we know, he was a hard man too, Jack Smolinski. He worked very hard and had expectations. So clearly,
that's right.
Your father,
yes,
instilled that into
him. I think, yeah. And yes, so as I say, he was hard, but he was generous too as well.
One of the things that's come out of leading into this story is that I didn't know was your father was a fearless punter. It was nothing for him to set a horse a year, 18 months out from a race and open the shoulders, so to speak.
Exactly. Yes, he did very well out of the punting. Obviously, like everybody that punts, they would lose as well, but you did right. He did, he'd spend months, as you said, 12 months maybe, getting a horse ready for that punt. And he had a very good owner and a good friend in Nick Matiasovic, who had a restaurant in the city. And Thursday night was payout night or collect night. And he would come out with his little, briefcase full of money, hopefully, and they'd pay out on the winner.
You remember those days, don't you?
I do remember that very well.
Yeah.
And in fact, I've got a grandfather clock here that Nick Matiasovic one day said to Dad, "Would you leave me the key?" He was going to Geraldine Races. "Leave me your house key." And he arrived with this big grandfather clock with a little plaque on the side of it, thanking him for all his efforts with the horses over the years. And
yeah, nice moment.
It was a nice moment, yeah.
We'll talk more about a couple of other likely lads who worked for your father. One of them has been a massive part of your life shortly. We need to move on, though, to love him or hate him, the mighty pacer Lord Module, who your father purchased for $3,000 at a yearling sales, but it wasn't the only horse he bought that year.
No, I think he bought 4, Greg, that year, for some Americans. He was never a great one for buying yearlings, actually, but he did get into it a little bit, and he bought 4 of these horses, and they rang and said they decided they didn't want to take the 4 of them. And Dad said, "Well, you take your pick," and they left Lord Module behind. So sometimes I think, when I look back, it might have been a lot easier for everybody if he'd gone. But he was certainly a crowd pleaser,
It'd be fair to say he was a challenge for your father.
Absolutely. And I can remember he took him up for the juvenile championship in Auckland as a 2-year-old. And he said, "Oh, I'm going to go with this horse when I bring him home because, he's so damn difficult." So I had a very good friend up there, Joe King, and they were keeping the horse in the stables at Alexandra Park where the public sort of walked past, and he had a box there, and every time a horse walked past he was screaming and yelling, and he was just awful. So Joe had a stainless steel factory, and he said, "I'll make a grill for the front of that box so that you can leave the door open but he can see out and won't get into trouble." So Joe went away and made the grill and brought it back and fitted it. A horse walked past, Lord Module wrecked the grill. That was the end of that. So, he was a handful. Another funny story was he went to Auckland later on, and as probably, I suppose it was a 4-year-old, and played up something dreadful on the flight.
On the plane,
on
yes.
the plane, and
Yeah.
everybody was terrified, I think. That, you know. So the morning that they were coming home, I think, and I hope I'm right about this, I think it was Robin Butt came along and said to Dad, "Look, Cecil, I'm sorry, but, you know, we're not going to travel back with that horse on the plane." And Dad said, "Oh, that's fine. Well, how are you getting home?"
Yeah.
So,
He
but
had
he
a bit of
did
humour to him,
tranquillise.
didn't he?
He did, yeah. He did tranquillise the horse, of course, going home. He was
Yeah.
better. But he was a handful, and gave Dad some pretty awful moments, really, at times, you know. So, but
Special moment too, winning the '79 Cup.
that's right. It was a special moment, yeah. And
And they
thank
just about tore the stand down. Close to doing that, they certainly did it in the Matson Free for All,
Yes.
because that's one of the greatest performances
That's
I've
right.
ever seen.
Armalite still in front of Gamelite, but they're almost on terms, turning for home. Armalite the inside and Gamelite the outside, and hands downs up 3 wide. They were followed by Bonnie's Chance, looking to get into the clear, and here's Lord Module. Oh, he's putting it up, brilliant run down the outside. Gamelite and Lord Module's coming down the outside, they love it. Lord Module's gone to the lead. Lord Module's going to win the Ellen Matson Free for All from Gamelite.
Didn't see it live. Clearly, I was a little bit too young at that
too
stage,
young,
but that performance was as good as
It
you'll ever
was
see.
outstanding, wasn't it? And he'd given so much trouble, you know, not going away, not going with the gate, and oh yes, he was a difficult horse. But he always had those quarter cracks that I think probably were at the base of it. Although he had an odd temperament as well, you know. So yeah,
I can remember the only time I saw him live. He came to Addington Raceway to lead a field out. It might have been for the Derby, and he decided to have a lie down, and he wasn't moving. He was going nowhere, and it was his moment in the sun. He hadn't been a racehorse for a wee bit, but
yeah.
he could be stubborn.
Oh, he could. He was really difficult, and I suppose Dad's perseverance with him has to be admired, really, because others probably would have given up, you know.
Yep.
But he had so much just raw natural ability when he wanted to put his mind to it.
Yeah, yeah.
So.
Your dad's parting gift or parting statement to you, I know, involved your mother.
Yes,
and
it was. He said to me, "Now, look after Mum and that horse." And I always say, "Well, I'm just glad he got it right."
got it round the right way. Yeah.
But it was important to him. I think also perhaps, you know, he was the last one in his later years, and so I think he always felt that he was the most what would I say, charismatic, I suppose, horse. And from that
He had that aura about him, didn't he?
he did, yes,
Yeah.
he did. And in later years, I always think Christian Cullen always reminded me of him, you know, just that presence and style and, something about him.
Those couple of whippersnappers I was talking about earlier, one being Dave Anderson, who's
Yes.
carved out a very successful harness racing career himself.
Absolutely.
The other bloke took your eye, and not only that, took your arm down the aisle, Kevin Williams. And
Yes.
yeah.
He did.
Tell us a little bit about the
Well-
courtship, because he worked for your father.
He did. He actually worked for him after I'd met him. Dad had been in America with Full Step and had several contacts over there that would ring him and look for horses. And a horse that Dad sorted out for a guy called Frank Molliker at Yonkers was a horse called Idaho, and he was owned by Kevin's father and mother. And so Dad made the sale, and Kevin came over with his parents this night, and he was going on the trip with no other than Robert Mitchell. So the two of them went. I can't just think what the horse was that Robert went with, but at the same time Orbiter was over there racing, so the Bagrets were there as well. So that was when I first met Kevin, and then he came back. He spent 6 months in the States, and then he came back, and he did come and work for Dad, and so it went from there. I don't know whether Dad was all that pleased about it, actually. He always thought that I'd be better out of the harness racing industry, but there you go. When you have a love for it, it's nice to be involved, isn't it?
There will never be another one like you. There will never be another one who can do the things you do. Oh, will you give another chance? Will you try a little try? Please stop and you remember we were together anyway. All right. And if you have a certain